Hello, I'm Africa 54 Managing Editor Vincent Makori in for Esther Guguyu. It's Wednesday, August the 18th, and this is Africa 54.
Will tech be enough to combat piracy in Nigeria? In Kenya, combating pollution with electric safaris. And how climate change is transforming the world's shorelines.
When Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu Hassan took office in April, she vowed a U-turn in politics from her predecessor, the late John Magufuli. But the arrest of opposition leader Freeman Mbowe in July is dimming hopes that Hassan would turn her back on Magufuli's iron-fisted style of rule. Charles Kombe reports from Dar es Salaam.
On this day, Neema Mwakipesile got a chance to read her favorite book after spending 15 days in police custody. She was accused of organizing a protest to demand the release of opposition party leader Freeman Mbowe.
I was denied to meet with my family and lawyers. Even the police themselves were like they were fearing me, as I was a terrorist or someone who had done a huge thing. Even when I asked them to help me talk with my family, they refused.
Freeman Mbowe, the leader of the Chadema party, was arrested last month in the port city of Mwanza, where he was to address a meeting to discuss constitutional reforms. In a court appearance, prosecutors accused Mbowe of taking part in conspiracies to blow up fueling stations as well as funding terrorist acts. The Chadema party denies the charges and claims the arrest aims to weaken the opposition party and its call for a new constitution.
We firmly believe that the ruling party, CCM, continues to remain in power because of the weakness of the current constitution. And for now, our first demand as Chadema is a new constitution.
In an interview with the BBC last week, President Hassan denied her government is targeting the opposition and instead accused it of wrongdoing.
Every party has its constitutions, their timetables, and delegates of their meetings. All these they are free to do anytime. What is not good is to demand the freedom to do political violence.
Both Mbowe and Chadema have denied all government accusations of backing terrorism or fomenting violence. Analysts say it appears there's no level playing field for politics in Tanzania.
All these paint a picture that there are unbalanced politics that rely upon the ruling party rather than having a democratic politics that show that there is a freedom for opposition's party to perform their activities, to participate in political meetings and hold rallies like other countries are doing.
Meanwhile, Neema Mwakipesile says he is still experiencing trauma resulting from her 15 days behind bars. He says despite the challenges, pro-democracy activists will continue their push for their goal. Charles Kombe for VOA News, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania.
A little south of the continent, Hakainde Chilema's victory over incumbent President Edgar Lungu in the August 12th Zambian presidential election vote was fueled by widespread discontent with the collapse of Zambia's economy, which has been saddled by falling prices of copper, its chief export, rising inflation, and unemployment. Standing by live via Skype from the Zambian capital, Lusaka, is VOA's Peter Clote. Now, Peter, initially it appeared that outgoing President Edgar Lungu was going to petition the election results, but it appears now that he has decided to drop the idea altogether. What do you hear made him change his mind?
Well, he had a series of Tanzania, Sierra Leone, that were hosted and mediated by former President Rupia Banda. So the incoming president and the outgoing president met at the house and they trashed issues. And after a few hours, he was not going to contest, despite being encouraged by some of his colleagues in the Patriotic Front to challenge the outcome of the elections in court.
So how have people reacted to this announcement from his side?
They reacted with relief, and you could see the spring in the steps of a lot of Zambians when I went around the city trying to gauge the mood in the country. People were apprehensive because they didn't know what could happen, but the decision by the president to say, all right, we are not going to contest again, but allow those parliamentary challenges to go ahead. He said he would not do it personally because then it will weaken or cast a shadow over the incoming president. So tension appears to have eased significantly in Lusaka.
As we briefly mentioned, there was a lot of talk about mismanagement of finances and even corruption in the now outgoing administration. What do the people say want to see the new administration do?
The incoming president, or the president-elect Hakainde Hichilema, is coming under intense pressure from civil society groups and human rights activists. And some of them are saying that officials of the previous administration might have committed an egregious act of financial malfeasances, or in some cases, financially misappropriated public funds or stolen them. So they are putting pressure on him to quickly investigate and prosecute those people. Others, on the other hand, are saying it is too soon to put pressure on him to act, because some of those people who are alleged to have committed these crimes could conceal evidence of the crimes they've committed. So they should allow the incoming president a free hand to operate. And even at a press conference, the incoming president, Hakainde Hichilema, said that he will allow the state institutions to do its work professionally, and that he will not use institutions of power to persecute anybody.
Yes. Now, we've seen people celebrate, which, should happen at this time. But do you see any concern by people over this new wave, this third wave of COVID-19?
Surprisingly, people are concerned, health experts are concerned that there seem to be a lull in who enforces the COVID-19 protocols, because the outgoing officials seem to want to hand over quickly to the incoming. So there appears to be uncertainty concerning who enforces those laws. So some of the bars are opened, people are going about their businesses, some are not even wearing face masks, and it's worrying to health experts that I spoke with today.
We hope they change that habit. Peter, thank you very much. That was viewers Peter Clotet reporting live via Skype from Lusaka, Zambia. Good job. Now, in a Nigerian port, drones, helicopters, and attack boats are ready to participate as a part of a U.S.-backed initiative to tackle piracy in the Gulf of Guinea, the most dangerous place on earth for seafarers. But experts say hardware alone will not solve the problem. David Doyle reports.
Helicopters hover overhead as speedboats race through the water. This equipment, put on show in Nigeria's Apapa port, is to be deployed against piracy in the Gulf of Guinea. It's part of the $195 million US-backed Deep Blue initiative, which aims to stem a rising tide of attacks and kidnappings in the most dangerous place on earth for seafarers. According to the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, Deep Blue is working and stemmed kidnappings in the Gulf of Guinea in the second quarter. That's after a record 130 sailors were abducted in 2020, compared with just 5 across the rest of the world. But there have already been 50 kidnappings recorded this year. Earlier this month, the USS Herschel Woody Williams docked in Nigeria to train regional security forces to use their new kit. Claire Pierangelo is the US Consul General in Nigeria.
Maritime security is not just the obligation of one nation. It takes cooperative efforts to achieve it. We continue to encourage strong domestic efforts that will integrate the existing regional structures to counter this growing threat of piracy in the Gulf of Guinea.
According to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, 38% of all hostages taken in the Gulf of Guinea in 2015 were foreign nationals, but that rose to 89% in 2020. And experts say it's going to take more than expensive hardware to fix the problem. The Gulf, also known as Pirate Alley, covers more than 900,000 square miles bordering countries from Senegal to Angola. But nearly all of the region's pirates originate from Nigeria's oil-rich but impoverished Niger Delta.
We also have some concerns, obviously, with Deep Blue.
Jacob Larson is the head of maritime and cybersecurity at Shipowner Association, BIMCO.
Development in the region is slower than elsewhere. The economy is lagging compared to the huge potential this region has in terms of raw materials and so on. It basically has a really negative impact for the region as a whole.
As international and local firms churn out Nigeria's oil, pollution in the Niger Delta means many people cannot farm or fish. And according to the United Nations, 70% of its roughly 30 million people earn less than $1 a day. UNODC estimates that Delta-based pirates netted $4 million in ransom payments in 2020. Due to the large sums involved, some kingpins are well connected, UNODC found, and there's concern about collusion by security forces. Earlier this year, Nigeria's Navy said it would strengthen measures to root out personnel who collaborate with kidnappers and criminals.
David Doyle of Reuters fired that report. Still in West Africa, IvoryCoast has expanded its Ebola vaccination drive in Abidjan after launching a campaign to vaccinate health workers Monday night in the wake of the country's first positive case in 25 years. An 18-year-old woman tested positive on Saturday after traveling by bus to Abidjan from neighboring Guinea. Health authorities have so far identified 9 people that the woman came into contact with, including 3 family members and 6 hospital staffers, according to the World Health Organization. One suspected Ebola case is in the hospital. Around 5,000 vaccines were made available to IvoryCoast by the WHO. Residents of Abidjan neighborhood where the woman lives were the first of the general public to receive vaccinations on Tuesday. Now, a new breed of safari vehicle is silently making its way across Kenya's Masai Mara. Nairobi-based Opbus is converting the gas-guzzling vehicle to offer tourists a more eco-friendly and quiet experience. VOA's Clara Frank reports.
Gliding silently through Kenya's Masai Mara National Reserve is a new generation of safari vehicle. Gone is the noise and emissions of the traditional gas guzzlers. This Toyota 4x4 Land Cruiser, driven by tour guide Sylvester Mukenye, is 100% solar powered.
If you drive here silently, you will of course get much closer to animals, especially the elephants that we are in now, because there's no vibrations on the ground and there's no the fume that will get a smell from like other cars. So with this, you can get all those things. They are not disturbed in any way.
Off-road vehicles are a common sight in the at-times carbon-heavy wildlife industry. But Mukenye is head keeper at Embu River Camp, an eco-lodge which runs entirely on solar power. It bought 3 of the vehicles, which were converted by Nairobi-based Opibus, the only company in Kenya currently changing diesel and petrol-powered off-road safari vehicles into electric ones.
What we do first is take out the engine.
Electrical engineer Wanjiru Kamau says the company has big plans to electrify Kenya's roads as well as its reserves, starting with minibus taxis.
What we envisioned by 2030 is to have all matatus on the road to be electric, as well as utility vehicles. And what we have at the moment also are motorbikes.
Kamau says the Swedish-Kenyan business has converted 10 vehicles used in Kenyan game parks. She adds that, as well as being more environmentally friendly, the electric motors cut operating costs by half. Clara Frank, VOA News.
Haiti's Civil Protection Agency on Wednesday has raised the death toll from Saturday's devastating earthquake to nearly 2,000 people, with almost 10,000 injured right now. Heavy rain from Tropical Storm Grace disrupted search efforts for a time Tuesday. The United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund says the heavy rain from the storm is hampering access to water, shelter, and other basic services. Hospitals in the southwestern part of the country where the quake occurred are being overwhelmed by the number of injured people and are in need of more medical staff and supplies, including pain medicine. Mexico and the Dominican Republic are among the countries that sent food and medicine to Haiti. Cuba has dispatched a 235-member healthcare team to the quake-stricken nation. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says the world body is on the ground in Haiti and had allocated $8 million from the Central Emergency Response Fund to provide essential health care, clean water, emergency shelter, and sanitation for all affected people. Well, we'll be right back.
Join me on the next Straight Talk Africa as we celebrate the records, the medals, and the victories of Africa's greatest athletes at the Tokyo Olympics. We'll look at what it would take to bring the Olympics to Africa. The continent has hosted big sporting events before, but it has yet to land the world's greatest athletic competition. We'll look at what kind of investment would be needed and whether Africans really want to host the Games. Join me, Haiti Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
Well, thanks to carbon emissions, our oceans are turning to acid. It's dissolving the shells of oysters and attacking global shorelines, damaging ecosystems that suck more carbon dioxide from ocean waters than all the world's vehicles spew into the air. In the first of a series of reports, viewers Veronica Balderas Iglesias explores the evil twin of climate change and how to remedy it.
Inside a mesh bag on Virginia's eastern shore is a gurgling answer to climate change. Scientists submerged oysters in a bed of seagrass, an experiment to see if underwater plants, which naturally absorb carbon dioxide, can protect them. You see, oceans are turning warmer and more acidic, thanks to humans burning fossil fuels. And this is hurting not just oysters, but the bountiful ecosystems around them.
Acidification occurs because the carbon dioxide we're adding to the atmosphere dissolves partly in the ocean and forms a weak acid. Any shell-forming creature has a more difficult job forming its shell in an ocean that's more acidic.
At stake is the destructive impact on marine life and the delicate food chains that sustain the world's fisheries. Take creatures called theropods. These tiny sea snails populate all the world's oceans and are a precious food for salmon and many important fish. But in acidic ocean waters, their shells dissolve. Scientists are studying ocean acidification, often called climate change's evil twin. At the Virginia Institute of Marine Science, Professor Emily Rivest runs experiments on oysters.
When we have that combination of warming and acidification, we see the most dramatic negative effects on the larvae. So they don't form their shell properly and they don't eat as well.
The experiments help aquaculture in the Chesapeake Bay. The massive estuary suffers from coastal acidification caused in part by heavy rains and fertilizer runoff. Michael Congrove owns a commercial oyster hatchery.
Where it becomes really tricky is when we have periods of poor water quality that we're not able to solve with our filtration solutions, and that can really put a dent in our production.
If these steps fail, oyster farmers like Brandon Eanes are at risk. He buys seed from hatcheries to sell for wholesale distribution.
You put them in these tanks and they grow.
Yes, ma'am. They put them in these tanks until they grow, until they're about half an inch. Something big enough that we can put in this bag.
Eanes is skeptical of human-made climate change. But he concedes that something in the past 10 years has shifted.
We have oysters grow in December. That's kind of not normal. They're not growing much, but as it gets warmer, I think, if anything, the calendar's shifted. If climate change is man-made, I would hope that man would be smart enough to stop doing what he's doing to have adverse effects.
At the end of June, a record heat wave had catastrophic effects for shellfish in the Pacific Northwest and Canada. At least 1 billion mussels died, says Elisa Gaiman, a marine ecologist at the Hakai Institute. Get used to it, scientists say. And the impacts will go beyond shellfish to marine life critical for tourism.
And I've been to places where the health of the corals is clearly diminished, starting with South Florida, parts of the Mexican Yucatan, much of the Caribbean, certainly parts of the Pacific also.
What can be done? Back to our patch of seagrass.
If you can promote the growth of seagrasses, they might actually benefit and have been shown to benefit, for instance, corals that are growing around them. The real solution is to reduce emissions around the globe.
An enormous problem for global leaders. But it's not stopping Todd Janeski from taking small steps. Janeski, with the Virginia Commonwealth University, is part of a multilateral effort to restore oyster habitat by recycling their own shells.
Those larval oysters grow on that shell and we put it onto restoration projects. We're seeing improvements in water clarity. We're seeing aquatic grasses nearby. By creating the habitat for oysters, what we have is a habitat for other animals as well.
Janeski has demonstrated the process to experts from Europe, Australia, and Asia. He says they are coming to recognize the value of oysters in the global fight against climate change. So, the lowly oyster may not be so lowly after all. Veronica Valderas Iglesias for VOA News, Gloucester Point, Virginia.
Now, according to a policy statement released by the Bank of Uganda, the second wave of COVID-19 appears to have hit the economy severely and is reducing prospects for a quick recovery. However, access to the internet, a growing middle class, and the changing shopping habits due to the coronavirus pandemic are leading to the rise of e-commerce businesses and a surge in online sales. For more perspective, Africa 54 technology correspondent Paul Dio spoke to Ron Kawamara, the CEO of Jumia in Kampala, Uganda.
You run Jumia Uganda. How has business been like for you in the last year?
The last year has been a challenging one for everyone in the economy. What we saw is that we had a total shutdown of the economy and it had strong ripple effects. But we saw that companies that did not have an online exposure were affected the most. And on the other hand, we saw the creativity and ingenuity of Ugandans who quickly pivoted to using innovation and technology to get the goods and the services that they need to be able to stay home and stay safe. So we saw a lot of new customers who had never used Jumia, who had never used online companies, begin to transact online. We saw thousands more of our partners or vendors who also embraced technology to continue to sell at a time where they could not sell in an offline space. So overall, I think that we saw a burst of innovation, young entrepreneurs who started small delivery companies, logistics providers, to make sure that they can continue to serve the public who was staying home and staying safe. And so I'd say that there was a silver lining in the tragedy that entrepreneurs used innovation to provide solutions at a time that many Ugandans and many Africans needed this.
Talk to us about how you've been able to run your businesses and what lessons you've learned this far.
For my context, we've learned that we need to adapt with the times. That before COVID-19, perhaps we were not very well set for all the essentials. And now we realize that by people staying home, they needed groceries, they needed fresh food, fresh produce, And so as Jumia, we quickly adapted to make sure that we have everything that a customer needs. Today, as a result, we're a much more complete business, that we have all the consumer needs available. We were the only providers of logistics up country. These are areas that don't have good connectivity to good retail. And with the lockdown that was in place, customers had no way of getting good retail in those tier 2 and tier 3 up-country areas. But because of our expansive logistics network, our warehouses, our pickup stations, we're able to serve a segment of people who otherwise were not catered for. So we learned how to be resilient. We learned how to adapt. We learned how to cater for the people at a time where they had no options. And I think that Jumia, as a result, is a much, the business is closest to the people, and the people love Jumia much more.
Interesting. When you look at the tech giants here, especially those that are in the e-commerce business, you look at Amazon, the likes of Alibaba. These are companies that grew like 1,000% in the last year or so. I wonder what it's been like for your companies back in Africa.
I think we need to add context to that question. If you are to look at the US, North America, or Europe, e-commerce or online transactions make up close to 30% of all transactions. And in Africa, we are still about 1% or less of all transactions happening online. And for the first time, we saw that e-commerce was a safe option, that customers were safer by buying online and staying home, that customers who could pay online avoided holding cash and potentially receiving or spreading the virus. And so for the first time, e-commerce or online business was not just a convenience, it was a necessity, it was the safe choice. That allowed us to grow quite fast. It really led us to get to a point whereby we can say we're reaching that point of no return. We feel that the customers that were acquired in the last 9 months do love buying and selling online. They do love the quality of the service they get, and they're coming back in very high numbers. So we might not be at the growth of Amazon yet. We're getting there, and what we saw in the last 9 months showed the trust that the public across the African markets have in online trade, and that, for me, is a very positive trend.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, that was Africa 54 technology correspondent Bondio speaking to Ron Kawamata, CEO of Jumia Uganda. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.